Wrestle Dream. Let's talk about Wrestle Dream. The show ended so late I started dreaming before it was over. I didn't go live last night, so this is going to be my review. If you were a babyface, especially a babyface in a title match, Saturday night was not a good night for you. If you were a heel in a championship match, break out the bubbly, because it was a good night to be bad. Jon Moxley is your new AEW World Heavyweight Champion for the 4th time. Jack Perry, still your TNT champion. The Young Bucks, still your AEW World Tag Team Champions, even though, according to Fightful, there were people behind the scenes who were pushing for Private Party to win that match, but it was not meant to be. Mariah May, still your AEW Women's World Champion. And Konosuke Takeshita, your AEW International Champion. It was a very heel-heavy night. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is subjective. The biggest surprise of the night, for me, was no blood. Especially after that main event that we got it all out last month. Outside of some very minor blood over Bryan Danielson's eyebrow, and Jeff Jarrett got a cut on his face, like on his cheek, in the post-match angle, I believe the rules in the state of Washington dictate no bleeding. Not allowed to bleed. So it was one of those rare months where we had more blood on the WWE pay-per-view than we did on the AEW one. It was actually nice for a change. We also had 2 surprise returns in MJF and Adam Cole. MJF has been out filming a movie. Cole has been out trying to get cleared, which he has now been medically cleared, after hurting himself more than a year ago. Adam Cole was revealed as the devil last year. He betrayed MJF after MJF lost the AEW World Championship to Samoa Joe. When MJF first came back at Double or Nothing, he dropped Adam Cole on his head, and he told the referees to get that piece of shit out of his ring. And he was wildly cheered for doing so, because he was the face, and Cole was the heel. And we had not seen Adam Cole since. And yet last night, there he was, every bit as wildly popular as MJF was when he first came back, only now it was Adam Cole chasing MJF out of the ring. The roles have been reversed. The shoe is now on the other foot. And it's actually not that hard to try to explain why Cole would be coming for MJF. I'm going to tell you why when I get to that part. But getting Cole and MJF back is big for Tony Khan because it gives him 2 big names back that he has not been able to use. Now, there was no Shane McMahon on this show. Though a lot of people were expecting a Shane McMahon appearance here. It's fine with me. I didn't want him there to begin with. But I was surprised that we did not see him at the very end. Instead, they shot a major injury angle with Bryan Danielson, who, after losing the AEW World Championship to Jon Moxley, thus ending his full-time career, was stretchered out of the arena. Tony Schiavone even filled in for Tony Khan in the post-show scrum because we were told Tony Khan went to the hospital with Bryan Danielson. And you had Darby Allin and other babyfaces, Orange Cassidy and Hook and Daniel Garcia. They all came out to the ring to try to fend off the heels. And they were foiled one by one. We even had Excalibur doing some horrible fake crying. Anytime Excalibur has to act, it's a bad night. He was doing this horrible fake crying. It almost killed the entire angle for me. If the goal was to get me to laugh, congratulations, because I was this close from losing my shit. God, was that terrible. The angle itself, I thought, was actually well done. And I assume Shane is still coming, but they're going to hold off until Full Gear, or maybe even World's End, like they did with the Devil reveal last year. I only hope this angle goes better for them than that one did. Now, as far as match quality goes, AEW, they always deliver great matches on these shows. This one was no exception. Moxley and Danielson, they had a really good main event with a really flat finish. Will Ospreay, Ricochet, Konosuke Takeshita, they stole the show. Nobody could touch them after that. Match of the night. Mariah May and Willow Nightingale, they had a really good women's title match. Hangman Page and Jay White, they opened the show with a banger of a match. So in ring, it was excellent. But some of the other matches I just didn't care about. Some of them felt slapped together at the last minute, and I just couldn't get into them. And when you have 5 straight hours of wrestling, if you include the pre-show, we're talking 5 hours of wrestling. It started at 7, they went off the air at midnight on the dot. after a while, this shit just starts to all run together. That's the drawback of doing really long shows like this. So it was not my favorite AEW show of the year. All In, for example, I enjoyed that more. I mean, that 1-2 punch of Danielson against Swerve and Ospreay against MJF just can't be beat. And then you throw in Tony Storm against Mariah May. But on the whole, I thought that this was a strong show. One with multiple stories coming out of it, including the BCC story. Kyle Fletcher turning on Will Ospreay. Adam Cole coming after MJF. Daniel Garcia now gunning for Jack Perry in the TNT title. And Swerve Strickland rejecting MVP services, which you know is going to lead to the debut of Bobby Lashley and a new program for Swerve. Those stories, not the matches, those stories are what are going to make Dynamite sink or swim in the coming weeks, and how interesting they make those stories. But you can't say they don't have any coming out of last night's show. They have multiple ones. They had 4 matches on the 0-hour pre-show. Brian Cage beat Atlantis Jr. to win the Ring of Honor television title. I do not care about the Ring of Honor television title, but good for Cage. I didn't have him figured for a win here. Anna Jay, coming off her stint in Stardom, picked up a win over Harley Cameron. Solid effort. You can see the improvement that Anna has made. But at the finish, Anna covered Harley, and Harley's shoulder was up off the mat. So the referee, literally right in front of the camera, I mean, he didn't know that, but the referee literally helped push her shoulder down so that he could count 1, 2, 3. It's where the best wrestle, you see. Yeah, that was a little embarrassing. The Acclaim got a win over MXM Collection, Mason and Mansoor, who had Rico in their corner. They dusted off Rico Constantino, doing his old Rico gimmick from WWE when he was with Billy and Chuck, dressed the same way. So it was amusing to see Rico and Billy Gunn back on TV together, although on opposing sides this time. Rico looks a little bit older. I mean, it's been 20 years. But even though he looks a little bit older, I think on the whole, he doesn't really look all that different. You know, he still mostly looks the same. They worked a spot where Rico ended up in the ring with Billy and tried a spin kick that Billy caught. And then Billy told him to suck his dick and hit him with a famouser. Rico did not, in fact, suck his dick, but he did take a bump off the famouser. Anthony Bowens hit the arrival on Mansoor, and then Max Caster hit the mic drop for the win. I enjoyed the Rico cameo. It was good to see him. Tony Schiavone was on stage to introduce Tony Khan and Antonio Inoki's grandsons, Hirota and Naoto. You know, Wrestle Dream was conceived last year as a tribute to Inoki. You know, Tony has called him wrestling's greatest dreamer. Tommy Dreamer is fuming right now. So the sentiment here I thought was nice. It was a nice sentiment from Tony Khan, but this segment was a disaster because the idea was that Tony would reference Inoki's classic chant, and they would throw the chant up on the screen so everybody else could see it, and they would all do the chant. So Tony mentions Inoki's chant, and at first nobody in the crowd responds when he first mentions it because, of course, they have no fucking idea what it is. So then Tony, he looks up at the screens like he's waiting for something. But there's nothing. Finally, they flash the chant on the big screen. It's Ichi ni san da. Ichi ni san da. And they have it up on the screen. And Tony calls for it one more time. Let's do it one more time. And nothing. Looks up at the screens. They're waiting for them to flash the chant again. It takes like 10 seconds before they finally throw it up on the screens. I winced through this entire thing. He meant well. I could appreciate that Tony Khan is a savant of wrestling history here, and obviously he's got a lot of love for Antonio Inoki, but yeah, this was not good. And the big party match on the pre-show, as they try to get as many people on the show as humanly possible, had the Outrunners, Orange Cassidy, and Kyle O'Reilly against John Silver, Alex Reynolds, Tony Nese, and Arya Daivari. You remember how over the Outrunners were in that tag team gauntlet match in their hometown? Well, it's not just their hometown. They're really over with these fans right now. And they even got the win here. So the good guys win. The Outrunners pick up the victory for their team. The Outrunners, they're a fun act, and they are getting over. And if I were Tony Khan, what I would do, especially since the Bucks held on to the belts last night and they didn't do a title change, I would build a story around the Outrunners eventually being the ones to beat the Bucks and win the tag team titles. I think it would be a great story. It's not a hard story to tell. I know they kind of come off as almost like a comedy gimmick. They're literally, something straight out of the 80s, even the vignettes, which I think are well done. Everything is meant to look very, dated and classic and retro. I love it. I dig that kind of stuff. But they're getting over. They're a team that make people happy. They make them smile. They make them laugh. They're into these guys. And hopefully they can keep that going. And you could easily tell a story where the Bucks aren't even taking these guys seriously, but they continue to win. They rack up wins. We see them more often on Dynamite, which we haven't, but I'm saying we should. And then eventually have them be the ones to take those titles. I also love that the Outrunners, they come out to The Man Who Made a Monster, which is a song by Dance with the Dead. I've had that on my Spotify playlist for years. It's a dark synthwave. I fucking love dark synthwave. I like synthwave in general, but love it. Midnight Danger is another one. I love their music. So the main card opened with Hangman Adam Page one-on-one with Switchblade Jay White. Jay White missed a few months with a foot injury. He also lost to Hangman in the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. That was his last match before he came back recently. So he was looking for a measure of revenge and also looking to get back on track so that he could challenge again for the AEW World Championship, which was music to my ears when he said that the other week, because I was worried when he comes back, they're just going to slot him right back into that trios garbage. He's better than that. But this was also a match where neither man could really lose, right? I wouldn't have beaten either one of these guys. I mean, I said it the other week. If it were up to me, I wouldn't even beat Hangman Page until he wins back the World Championship, because I'd put that title on him. Then eventually Swerve can win the belt back. When he does, he wins it back from Hangman, right? You put some distance between them for a while. You don't go right back to it again. But that would be long-term storytelling with those two. So I wouldn't have beaten Hangman, but yeah, Jay White just came back. Ideally, you don't want to beat him in his first big match back either. But that's what they did here. They beat Hangman, and they gave Jay White the win. And I can't hate on this. They had a great match. It was a great opener. And the finish was great, too. White was taking shots all night long in this match at Hangman's leg, including a knee breaker on the edge of the ramp. And when Hangman eventually tried for the buckshot lariat, he couldn't really pull it off because of the leg. So then he went for it again, and this time when he vaulted himself into the ring, he flew right into the waiting arms of Jay White, who dropped him with the Blade Runner, and he pinned him. And that got a great reaction. It didn't take much to get the fans to cheer for Jay White. And they did the finish in such a way that protected Hangman because of the injury. These are the two guys right here. I shouldn't say the two guys. These are two guys that Tony Khan should be building his company around. And not the only two. They've got Will Ospreay. They've got MJF. They've got Swerve. A lot of talent in this company. But these two need to be in that group. Mariah May and Willow Nightingale for the AEW Women's World Championship was even better than their final in the Owen Hart tournament back in July. To set this up, Willow lost to Chris Statlander at All Out. The same Chris Statlander who is now a babyface again for her feud with Mercedes. So why is Statlander getting a shot at the TBS title? And Willow, who lost to her, is getting a shot at the women's world title. Maybe Britt Baker was supposed to beat Willow on Dynamite and she was supposed to be in this match. I don't think so. I didn't think they would beat Britt at Wembley and then just beat her again, like put her into another title match for the other belt and beat her there again. But at least if she was supposed to get the shot, and she did, she got sick. She missed the show on Wednesday with strep throat. And they had to call an audible and make Willow the number one contender. At least that would make some sense, but I don't know if that's the case or not. Mariah May is a terrific heel. If you didn't know that already, I mean, this woman slapped the shit out of her own mother at Wembley Stadium. And then, of course, that great angle where she turned on Toni Storm, one of the great segments all year on Dynamite. So Mariah May is a great heel. And Willow is an even better babyface. So they had the crowd loud, especially for the final few minutes they did. Mariah connected on Mayday. Willow kicked out, which left Mariah shocked. And Willow avoided Storm Zero, tried to pounce. Mariah fired off a headbutt, but before Willow went down, she swung for the fences and blasted her with a lariat into the double down. Mariah floated over a Dr. Bomb, but Willow hit a running Death Valley driver into the turnbuckles. Then on the ropes, Mariah tried for a Rana attempt, but Willow muscled her up into a powerbomb position, which Mariah then turned into a Hurricane Rana, and she took Willow off the top all the way to the mat. The fans are on their feet for this. Mariah lands a charging knee strike and then immediately hits Storm Zero and pins her to retain the title. This was very good, and it just doesn't seem to matter how many times Willow loses. She's still super over. And Mariah needed a match like this, I think, to really solidify her title reign, which has been pretty lackluster. I mean, let's be honest. And not because of her work or anything like that, but it's just been a very paint-by-numbers, lackluster run these last couple of months. And so she got the match that she needed here. This was the best defense of her run so far, easily. The post-show press scrum, I have to mention this, because I watched the post-show press scrum. I mentioned Tony Khan was not there. They had Tony Schiavone filling in. It was depressing. They trotted Mariah May out there, and they asked if anybody had any questions, if any of the reporters in the room had any questions. And at first, nobody raised their hand. Like they're looking around. You can see them scanning the room. They're hoping, they're praying that somebody's going to put their hand up. They're like, don't be shy now. So finally, one guy put his hand up from bodyslam.net, and he asked the question, but that was it. You know, Tony Schiavone threw it back for more questions, and they just sat there waiting. And finally, she stormed off. You mean to tell me that there is not one person in that fucking room who could raise their hand and ask a kayfabe question about her thoughts on Mercedes as the TBS champion and try to get some snarky comment from her about Mercedes, right? Maybe a future match with her, or ask about her friendship with Mina, or ask about Jamie Hayter. What do you think about Jamie being back, and would you like to defend your title against her? Because that's the match that I'm waiting for. You know, I got people out here on social media talking about a rematch with Toni Storm. Oh, they must be waiting, and they're going to do a rematch with Toni. So they're just sort of delaying the inevitable. They don't have anything for Mariah to do, which, by the way, don't be that person. That's bullshit. That's making excuses for them. But you got people out here talking about a rematch with Toni Storm. There's nothing to be gained from that. They told their story already. What they need to do is build to Jamie Hayter challenging Mariah May and getting her belt back that she was effectively screwed out of. Not that I can blame these people too much for not asking about Jamie Hayter. I mean, what the hell have they done with her since she came back? But I was sitting here, I'm suffering secondhand embarrassment watching that press scrum, and they're just sitting there. And nobody could think of anything to ask this woman? Are they too busy taking selfies? Like, why are they even there? Why even go to a press scrum if you're not going to ask questions? Jack Perry against Katsuyori Shibata for the TNT Championship. This is one of those matches that just came out of nowhere with no real build. Perry is hated enough that he got good heat. The finish did not go over well with the crowd at all. Shibata sank in a rear naked choke, only for Perry to bridge up, and the referee counted Shibata's shoulders down for the 3 count. And the boos rained down. Now, they did it as a way to protect Shibata. I don't know why Shibata needs protecting. What are they protecting him for? But Perry is a sneaky little shit, so I guess it kind of fits his MO. Perry attacked him with a belt shot after the match. He was going to go for another one when Daniel Garcia sprinted to the ring and he got up in Perry's face. And Perry shook his head no, and he bailed. And all of a sudden, they played MJF's music, and out walked Happy Gilmore's son. He's back. He power walked to the ring. He went face to face with Garcia until Jack Perry blasted Garcia in the back of the head with the TNT title, and then he left. MJF took his jacket off, he took the microphone, he brought up the so-called bidding war for Garcia, which he said was about as real as the Seattle Supersonics. Instant heat for that here in Tacoma. It wasn't Elias heat from that one Raw segment years ago, but boy, these people, they do not like it when you bring up the Supersonics. So it's easy heat. I'd love to know more about this bidding war, though. What war was there for the services of Daniel Garcia? I mean, yeah, come on. He's a good wrestler, but let's not get carried away now. So he also thanked Garcia for mentioning that he pawned the Dynamite Diamond ring at a pawn shop in Buffalo because it took him some time, but he tracked it down and he got it. He found it and he pulled out the ring. So I guess Tony Khan had time to have another one made. Maybe with some of that Warner Brothers Discovery money. He told Garcia he was going to kiss it. And he placed the ring on his finger, but before he could use it, Adam Cole's music hits, and he got a huge babyface reaction, even though the last time we saw him, he was a heel. Fans are very forgiving. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So he and MJF have now flipped roles, and the Undisputed Kingdom was but a very bad dream. One of the greatest fails in AEW history. If I were them, I would pretend that it never happened too. Because as soon as they both got hurt, it killed the entire angle. They should have dropped it right then and there. And Cole, he actually ran to the ring. And MJF bailed into the crowd. Cole helped Garcia to his feet, and they each paid respect to each other with a fist bump. The match was a complete afterthought. It only existed to set up the Garcia save and the two returns that came after. Nobody is talking about Jack Perry against Katsuyori Shibata. They're talking about everything that happened after the match. Now, whatever you think of Adam Cole gets a lot of shit from a lot of people. Oh, he's too small. Oh, he's so skinny. Look at this. My sister is bigger than Adam Cole. You know what? You may be right. I've seen your sister. She is bigger than Adam Cole. But these fans here in the building, they treated his return like a big deal. In their eyes, he's a major star. They like him, and they're happy to have him back. And so getting two big names back, like Cole and MJF, can only help the show. So they set up Cole against MJF as one direction, and they set up Perry against Garcia as another direction. So these are two future programs now that are coming up very soon. I think that Daniel Garcia is the one to take that title from Jack Perry. Because they did re-sign him. They did throw, I'm sure, some good money at him. And they do look at him as somebody that they want to build around. You know, Daniel Garcia has been in AEW now for a number of years. We used to call him Main Event Garcia because he was having main event matches almost every week on TV against the big names in the company. You saw him in there with people like Moxley and Danielson. I think he may have wrestled Kenny Omega and a bunch of different people. So if that's how they view him, and they think that there is something there and they want to build him up, then he should be the one, now that he's this big babyface who's all elite now, he should be the one to take that title from Jack Perry. If Tony Khan is serious about pushing him. Now, as far as Cole and MJF, why would Cole target MJF? Well, besides the fact that the last time we saw him, he took a brain buster from him, got dumped on his head. Just look back at that first promo on TV at the beginning of this year. This was after World's End. This was after he stabbed MJF in the back. He called MJF a narcissist. A narcissist who ran his mouth for years about how much better he was than everybody else. And he stabbed MJF in the back before he had the chance to do the same to him. He did everything for MJF. He even broke his ankle for him. He blamed MJF for what happened to his leg. And it's true. I mean, when he came out at Grand Slam last year, they had that ramp, and that's how he got hurt. He ran down the ramp. He jumped off, and he broke his fucking ankle. And he did it to come down to rally MJF during his match with Samoa Joe. He holds him responsible for what happened. He lost more than a year of his career because of that. That's enough of an explanation for me. In a company where they don't always take time to explain things just sort of happen. It's like the Joker in The Dark Knight, right? Do I look like a man with a plan? Somebody should put the Joker makeup on Tony Khan. Do I look like a man with a plan? I just do things, right? In a company where we see a lot of that, this explanation is good enough for me. And I suspect that we'll hear that from Adam Cole maybe this Wednesday when he cuts his first promo. But that's where I think they're going with it. So they had to course correct because the original angle was a flop. There was no saving it, especially not after the choice they made to turn MJF heel again. I don't know when we get the match. I don't even know, that Cole is going to be wrestling right away, even though he is said to be medically cleared. They may be holding off a little bit longer. World's End would, make sense because it's the anniversary of the Devil reveal. So if you wanted to do the match on that show, that would certainly make sense. Then we had the match that I wanted to see. For the international title, Will Ospreay defending against Ricochet and Konosuke Takeshita. How we got here? Suspect. Suspect at best, given that they were teasing a match with Takeshita and Okada for the Continental title, and then they pivoted to this. As a match, you knew it would steal the show. Any Will Ospreay match is likely going to steal the show on any given night, but you throw in Ricochet and you throw in Konosuke Takeshita, and you've got a Match of the Year candidate, which is what these three had. Don Callis joined on commentary at ringside. Takeshita set up a table at ringside that would come into play later in the match. And there was a wild sequence where Takeshita wiped out Ospreay with a crunchy into a deadlift German. Ricochet then flew in with a handspring, but Takeshita countered into a Blue Thunder Bomb for 2. Takeshita then destroyed these men with a pair of forearm shots. He threw a lariat so hard that Ospreay flipped over onto his feet and then dropped him with an Os Cutter. But before Ospreay could even get up or go for the pin or anything, Ricochet comes flying in from off screen with a springboard 450 splash. And then we had some Poison Rana no cells, which I could do without, from Ospreay and Ricochet. I hate that. Takeshita looked down at the table outside, and he delivered a crunchy to Ricochet down through the table. And then back inside, Ospreay met Takeshita climbing back in with a hidden blade, but he kicked out at 1. So Ospreay hit it again, but this time Don Callis pulled the referee out of the ring. And then Callis got into the ring. He went for a screwdriver shot. Ospreay blocked it, and he got Callis set up for a tiger driver until Kyle Fletcher, dressed in a hoodie to conceal his identity, except that we could all tell who it was. He hit the ring, and he hit Ospreay in the back of the head with a screwdriver shot. Kyle Fletcher turns on his best friend. And Takeshita dropped his knee pad. He hit the power drive knee. And he covered Ospreay to win the international title. So they protected Ricochet by not having him take the losing fall. And they protected Ospreay in so much as, obviously, he got attacked with a fucking screwdriver. So he's got that as a built-in excuse. But Takeshita now holds gold for the first time here in AEW. After the match, Fletcher picked up Ospreay. He hit a Tiger Driver 91 or 93 or 97. Who gives a shit? He dropped him on his fucking head. It seemed obvious Fletcher was going to be turning, especially the other week when he and Callis, they had to leave early, right? Leave early to go catch a flight. That was the night that Takeshita attacked Ospreay and Ricochet during their match. This was an outstanding match. This was spectacular. It's about damn time they put gold around Takeshita's waist. He's too good not to be a champion. And if they're not going to do anything with him and Okada right now, then the international title is a great fit for him. This is something I would have done a long time ago. I would still love to see Takeshita go to the finals of the Continental Classic. I said this last week, beat Okada there. They could always get back to it. But they obviously decided they didn't want to turn him right now. They want to keep him as a heel. If you did that, he would very likely end up being a babyface. But this was easily the best Ricochet match of his run so far in AEW. Ospreay, look, I don't mind them taking the title from him because they need to start building him for a world championship run next year. So that's fine with me. We know that's where he's headed. Texas, all in next year. That should be his crowning moment. He doesn't need the international title right now. He's not harmed by losing the international title. They advertised an appearance by Swerve Strickland here in his hometown. And it was smart, I thought, to put this here because there was no match that could follow what we just saw. Now, we have not seen Swerve since All Out. Prince Nana introduced him out to the ring, but not before plugging his coffee. He plugged his Prince Nana coffee. When Swerve and Nana, they came back to House of Glory in July, I got handed something about, it was like a flyer, about Prince Nana's coffee. And this guy, he was hanging around. He had to be his business partner. And I didn't even know if it was real. It seemed like a parody or something. But then I realized, no, it's actually very real. And I'll tell you what, if I actually drank coffee, I might try it. But I think coffee is disgusting, so I'm not going to. But I'm sure Prince Nana's coffee tastes like strawberries and rainbows. I'm sure it's delicious. Swerve said that it feels weird to be out there with the AEW title not around his waist, but he's happy to be home again. He announced that he is medically cleared, and he was about to address his future when he was interrupted by MVP and Shelton Benjamin. And MVP said that it's his future that he wanted to come out here to discuss. Maybe Nana didn't give him MVP's business card. He said Swerve's career is floundering a little bit right now. Thankfully, MVP is good at taking former champions and reminding them why they're great. So he said, let's talk business. Swerve then put over MVP. He put over Shelton Benjamin. But he also said that MVP wasn't wrong about the things that he said about Prince Nana. And this made Nana very nervous. Swerve said, I lost my title and my childhood home under your watch. He said that, on the other hand, I wouldn't have had all those things if it wasn't for Prince Nana. But man, the potential with me and MVP and Shelton, we can make history together. So Swerve told Nana there are things about him that irk him sometimes. Said Nana is, for one, he's still selling weed to high school kids out in parking lots. That sounds like a matter for Tony Khan's disciplinary committee. But the biggest thing about Nana is that he's family. And then he looked at MVP and he said, and I don't turn my back on my family for anybody. He told MVP he could take his business cards and shove them up his ass because he's not interested. And Benjamin told Swerve that you misread the situation. There is no Swerve without us. There is no Swerve without them. And Benjamin said Swerve is either with them or against them. And Nana tried to push Benjamin. Benjamin shoved him. Swerve was about to go after Shelton. MVP got between them. And then on the stage when they left, MVP looked back and he pointed at his watch while looking at Swerve. This was good stuff. Swerve came off like a total star here. And it helped being in his hometown for him to get that kind of reception. It was a television segment for sure, but they were in Swerve's hometown, so it makes sense to have him on this show. You don't want to leave him off. Them doing this here, though, I thought for sure we were going to get the Bobby Lashley debut. Whether he attacked him or he just kind of came out and didn't say anything and just made an appearance to get people talking. We had Adam Copeland last year. He made his debut on the show at the very end. I thought maybe this year it would be Lashley showing up. But I actually like that they didn't do it here. They throw so much shit at us sometimes. Case in point, look at what happened earlier in the show where you had Garcia come out and then MJF came out and then Adam Cole returned. They need to save some stuff for TV. You don't want to throw everything out there in one segment or on one show. You don't want to give everything away like that. So also keep in mind, I don't think that they wanted to kill two hometown guys in one night since they were already doing the angle with Bryan Danielson later to close the show. So to stretcher him out and then also leave Swerve laying would have been a buzzkill. But it's clear that the Almighty is on his way in. We had the undefeated Hologram at 14-0 against the Beast Mortos. Best 2 out of 3 falls. I don't know why that's funny. Best 2 out of 3 falls. No Jake the Snake Roberts out there with Mortos. Maybe the partnership is already over before it's even had a chance to begin. For those who may have missed Dynamite on Tuesday, which was a lot of you, Jake is the new manager for La Facción Ingobernable. He is La Serpiente Mexicana. Yes, it is as ridiculous as it sounds. Give it a few months, it'll be completely forgotten about, as most of Jake's run has been so far. But Jake was not there. It was a lucha spot fest, and the fans really didn't care at first. They did get vocal for the big spots. I just couldn't get into it, especially after that three-way we just saw. It was also 2 out of 3 falls, and Mortos pinned Hologram to win the second fall, which is strange because they have an undefeated streak going with Hologram, which they're still acknowledging because he technically won the match, so he's now 15-0. But it was just weird to book him in a match where he would have to be pinned. And also, that was the first time he's ever been pinned, and the crowd did not give a shit. It's not like they reacted big, like, oh my God, Hologram's been pinned. It was almost like, you know what? What do you think? The line at the bathroom, you think it's long, or should I wait a little bit? I don't know. But they also started repeating spots late in the match. Like there was a diving crucifix bomb that they did, I think it was in the first fall. And that was cool. And then they did it again later. Like Hologram did the same move again later. And I'm like, am I watching a replay of the first half of this match? It was almost like they started running out of ideas. Like, okay, the match maybe should not have gone this long. We're out there for like 16 minutes. Hologram won the first fall. Mortos won the second. And then Hologram won the third to win the match. This could have been saved for Dynamite. This could have been saved for Collision. You know, especially with the 2 out of 3 fall stipulation, they could have structured the ad breaks around the end of those falls, you know, to minimize the disruptions in the match. But they just signed a deal with Fox Sports Mexico. They're looking to expand internationally and sign more deals like this. They want to do more lucha matches like this on a regular basis because of that new deal, I guess, to appeal to that audience. And that's fine. But the show was long enough. It did not need this match.
Hey, it's CVV, Chris Van Vliet popping in here for just a second. Obviously, you love wrestling podcasts. I mean, you're listening to one right now. When this episode ends, don't let the fun end there. Go check out my podcast, Insight with Chris Van Vliet. All of the interviews that you might have seen clips of on social media or on YouTube, they're all available right here in audio form. Some of my recent interviews include Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes, Dave Bautista, Ken Shamrock, Otis, Damian Priest, Bronson Reed. The list goes on and on and on. So go search for Insight with Chris Van Vliet on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this right now.
We had Darby Allin against Brody King. They did not announce this as a street fight, but I guess every Darby Allin match is basically a street fight, and that's kind of what it turned into with the use of the steel steps. Either that or these referees are awfully lenient. This was Darby taking the usual crazy bumps and getting the crap beaten out of him by his larger opponent. King wanted to set up a superplex onto the steel steps that were positioned outside. But Darby fought out of it. He pie-faced Brody off the ropes, and he took this hellacious bump down onto the flat part of the ring steps. That's a big body to take a big bump like that. And then Darby followed with a coffin drop onto Brody on the steps. The referee laid down the count. King barely made it back inside before the 10 count, but he rolled right into a coffin drop, and Darby got the win. They were not going to beat Darby in Tacoma, even though he's from Seattle. But they gave him the hometown welcome, even still. But they weren't going to beat him because Darby needed this win to reset after losing his guaranteed world title shot to Jon Moxley because he's an idiot. After the match, Brody offered Darby a handshake out of respect, which Darby accepted. I don't know what they're doing with Brody King going forward. I mean, almost doesn't even feel like he's part of the House of Black. I mean, I know he is. But maybe get him a singles run. Yeah, again, those guys have been doing the trios thing now for so many years that I think all three of them, frankly, would benefit from, even if they don't break up per se, but you could get so much more out of the House of Black if you get serious about pushing some of them as singles and making them serious contenders to some of those, mid-card championships that you have in this company. The Young Bucks against Private Party for the AEW World Tag Team titles. They aired a hype video for Private Party beforehand showing the Amazing Red, giving them a pep talk, trying to fire them up. The Amazing Red being the one who trained them, and many others. HOG represent, by the way. You better put some fucking respect on that man's name. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough pep in this talk because they still lost. Private Party was not built up very well as believable, credible challengers for the titles. In fact, they were bullied and beaten up by the Blackpool Combat Club only a few weeks ago. But then they picked up a few wins here and there, and so boom, they're the number one contenders. But they had me thinking tonight might just be their night. At the beginning of this match, when the Bucks, they literally were rubbing the belts in their faces and telling them this is as close as you will ever get to holding these titles. They called them a couple of mid-card failures. I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of harsh. Surely they have to be winning if the Bucks are burying them 6 miles beneath the earth. But nope, they backed up everything they said before the match. It was very quiet at times, but I think that's more a product of how poorly they built this up. Because if the crowd was invested, they would have sounded like it. This is what people don't understand. Why is the crowd so quiet? Because they're not invested. You have a crowd that's invested, or they're super into the challengers, or they think they really have a shot at winning the championships, then they'll be louder. If they're not, then what does that tell you? Now, they did get loud at times with some of the late near falls. Matt Jackson kicked out of a gin and juice, which is Private Party's finish. Zay showed some life late when he avoided an EVP trigger, but he got scooped up into a TK driver and planted for the 3 out of nowhere. And Zay was dejected after the match. He had his head in his hands like he was crying, but they got a respectful reaction from the crowd. Some polite applause. They showed Stokely Hathaway smirking in the crowd because Private Party had rebuffed his recent offer to manage them. So with the loss here and the way they lingered on them when the match was over, maybe they go heel and they link up with Stokely. I don't think they have to go heel, but get that harder edge to them, and maybe they link up with Stokely. And if they link up with Stokely, then like with Chris Statlander, a couple of months later, they too can randomly turn face again and they can split away from him. But I've had expired, moldy bread in my house that was not as stale as the Young Bucks are right now. They need to drop those titles ASAP. As I said earlier, build up the Outrunners and let them be the ones to do it. By this point, I was ready for the main event. I'm like, all right, bring on Danielson and Moxley. And then I remembered, oh shit, we still had a Chris Jericho match. It was 11 p.m. and the Jericho match was only just beginning. I like Mark Briscoe and all, but that is just unacceptable. Unacceptable. Jim Ross joined for these last couple of matches. It wasn't even a bad match. It was good. I just couldn't bring myself to care about it. Brian Keith got involved near the end behind the referee's back until Rocky Romero fought him off to the back. I thought I was watching Rampage. Jericho wanted a J Driller of his own. He hit it. Briscoe, though, kicked out. And Mark fired up, hit a froggy bow, and then the J Driller to retain his Ring of Honor World Championship. The story they told was that Jericho thought Jay Briscoe could have beaten him, but not Mark. You're not your brother. So Mark was out to prove him wrong and to basically tell Jericho to keep his brother's name out of his mouth. We saw him get serious in a promo the other day on TV. That I liked. The match itself was fine. Putting it on this late, though, didn't do it any favors. The main event was Jon Moxley challenging Bryan Danielson for the AEW World Championship. I don't think it's a hot take to say that this was their greatest match together of all the matches they've had against one another. And I liked it even better than their Revolution match 2 years ago, the one where William Regal came out at the very end. Because they were going at it and he got between them and that was the birth of the BCC. That was a really good match, but I like this one better. And they bled buckets in that match. And outside of some incidental blood from Bryan here, neither man cut themselves open. And look at that. They didn't even need it. Moxley jumped him before they even hit the chorus for Final Countdown, which is a total heel move. And they kept the music playing until the music was over. Tony Khan paid for it. He's going to make sure he gets full use of it if this is the last time he gets to use it for a while, because who the hell knows when we're going to see Bryan Danielson again. So Tony Khan made sure he was going to get his money's worth. So it was kind of like Anarchy in the Arena in a way, the first few minutes with the music playing while they brawled everywhere. Moxley gave him a pile driver on top of the announce desk. You knew they would make Danielson's neck the focal point of the match. It's been the focal point of every Bryan Danielson match, at least since Ospreay dropped him on his head with the Tiger Driver at Dynasty. Now, he's been selling injuries all year long, but the neck stuff goes back at least that far. Marina Shafir was the only one out there with Mox. There was no Claudio, there was no Pac, there was no Wheeler Yuta. And she kept getting involved. She pulled up the mats outside to expose the concrete. Moxley tried for a pile driver, but Danielson backdropped him on the floor. It took most of the match before Bryce Remsburg finally had enough of Shafir's antics and ejected her. Bryan did a dive, Moxley caught him. and delivered a Death Rider on the concrete outside, then rolled him inside and covered him, but Bryan kicked out. Danielson hit a Busaiku knee. Moxley, though, kicked out. So Moxley hits another Death Rider, and this time Danielson kicks out at 1, and the crowd explodes. So Bryan spat on him. Moxley grabbed him, hit a Gotch-style pile driver, and then sank in the rear naked choke. Danielson's fighting it, starting to fade, and he collapses backwards. Bryce checks the arm, he calls for the stoppage, and he awards the title to Jon Moxley, who is now the only 4-time AEW World Champion in history. The fans, I would say, they were equally shocked and furious over the finish because they were not expecting it, and then they realized that that meant that not only did Bryan lose the belt, but his full-time career was over, and they were very upset. Danielson went down fighting. He never quit. My only issue that I had with it was as soon as the match ended, he immediately rolled to the corner, showing that he, in fact, was not unconscious anymore. Yeah, he should have laid there for a little bit longer before moving. Like, I know people go out and then they can wake back up quickly, after the lights go out, but this was like too quick. This was like, ding, ding, ding. And it's like, okay, let me roll over here now. It's like, hey, brother, just wait. Like, can't you wait like 10 seconds and then come to and then roll to the corner? But that aside, a minor nitpick, an excellent match with the expected title change. Fightful is reporting that Moxley was Danielson's hand-picked opponent to end his full-time career. And if Tony Khan gave Bryan Danielson power over how he went out, it was really the most Bryan Danielson thing to do, because not only did he lose at home, he chose to be murdered on his way out. I want you to put a plastic bag over my head. I want you to try to break my neck. All these things that followed here. Claudio, Pac, Marina Shafir, they all come out to the ring. And Moxley hands the AEW World title belt to Claudio to place inside of a black duffel bag. Like they were getting ready for like a big drug deal. There was no post-match feel-good goodbye speech for the live crowd, nor will there be on Dynamite this week. We are not going to see Bryan Danielson for a very long time. He probably will be getting neck surgery soon. If he does, who knows how long he would be out for anyway. But he will be back for his revenge. I don't believe for a second that he is done, or that he is even done with any of these men. But it's going to be a long time before we see him again in the ring. Darby Allin and Wheeler Yuta, they ran out to make the save before they could use another plastic bag on Danielson. But then Yuta hit a Busaiku knee to Darby, and the heels duct taped Darby's wrists to the middle rope, so he was trapped in the corner. All he could do was watch helplessly. He had no place to go. And Yuta had a conflicted look on his face, but then Moxley handed him the plastic bag, and it looked like Yuta said, "I'm sorry," before he did it, but he reluctantly suffocated Bryan with the plastic bag. At least this did not go on for an uncomfortable length of time, like when Moxley suffocated him. And I see people pointing out that, while Yuta was hurt at the end of Dynamite, Bryan Danielson was busy doing yes chants and he was celebrating. And so that's why Wheeler Yuta attacked him. And that's all well and good if you also ignore the fact that it was Claudio who hit him 3 times in the gut with a hammer in the first place. Jeff Jarrett ran in. Oh boy. Jeff Jarrett. Now, to be fair, Jeff Jarrett has been on TV in the lead up to All In. He was the one who was going up to Bryan Danielson, trying to fire him up and kind of giving him a pep talk in the way that the Amazing Red did with Private Party. So it's not like Jarrett wanting to run in and come to Bryan's aid is completely out of left field, but still, I mean, come on. Jeff Jarrett runs in. It's almost midnight on the East Coast, and Jeff Jarrett is running out to make the save on this pay-per-view. Private Party ran out as well. They were all dispatched very quickly by Moxley and his crew. The absolute best part of this was Jim Ross on commentary. After Tony Schiavone screams, "Jeff Jarrett has arrived," he responds in the most sarcastic way imaginable. And maybe he didn't intend for it to come off like that, but it did. He just goes, "Not Jeff Jarrett." Like, I can visualize him rolling his eyes in the back of his head as he was saying it. Like, it just came off so condescending as they're trying to sell this heinous, serious beatdown angle. Not Jeff Jarrett. Like, oh God, JR, man, even when he doesn't intend to, like, there's still some gems in there. There's still some gems in there from good old JR. But then Claudio placed a chair around Danielson's neck and he stomped on it. And that brought out the rest of the locker room. Orange Cassidy, Adam Cole, Daniel Garcia, Mark Briscoe, Hook, and the BCC bailed. And Jim Ross correctly asks the question, where the hell have you guys been? Which is a totally valid question. They're in the back. They just watched this man get murdered in front of his friends and family. And they just stood around in the back until he got his neck broken, and then they had seen enough. So Cassidy helped security free Darby. They got a box cutter or whatever it was, razor blade, and they cut him free. They brought a stretcher out for Danielson, and Excalibur begins fake crying. Like, the somber voice is one thing. We get the somber voice for some of these angles sometimes in wrestling. But the fake crying, it was so bad. Like, you've got Excalibur and he's like, I it gets very low. He goes, I've been here all 5 years here in AEW. Like, what the fuck? Darby Allin, he's sitting outside up against the barricade, head in his hands, very upset over what had happened. Orange Cassidy was trying to console him, I guess. He was kind of just, like, huddled over him. And Garcia is standing there, and Hook is there. All AEW originals in this camera shot. I actually thought that closing camera shot, when they put the copyright on the screen, and you just saw Darby, and then there's Orange Cassidy, and there's Hook, and there's Garcia, just given who was in that shot. I thought that was a very powerful shot, and I'm sure that was not, done by accident that way, that those were the men that were in that camera shot. These are all AEW guys, through and through. It was a depressing way to go off the air, but that was the point. It was a heavy angle to put over Moxley and his crew as the most sadistic heels imaginable. I like the angle. You don't always get a happy ending to these things. And they wanted a big angle to lead into Dynamite this week. A lot of people were probably expecting Shane McMahon and may have been left disappointed that they didn't get him. I was expecting him too, but I was not hoping for him, so I'm totally fine with him not being there. Although I'm sure he's coming in. I don't think they need him. But I'm sort of resigned to it at this point. And if he's coming in, I don't think we see it on Wednesday either. I think that's something they would say for a pay-per-view reveal. They've got Full Gear and World's End left on the calendar this year. As I said earlier, last year we got the Devil reveal at World's End. Adam Cole was the Devil for 2023. Maybe Shane will be their Devil for 2024. Them placing the belt in the bag like they were stealing it was interesting. I don't know what to make of that unless they're effectively stealing it to give to Shane or whoever the puppet master is behind all of this. It felt like they may be setting up Darby Allin to be the one to take the title from Jon Moxley. Moxley beat Darby at Grand Slam. Darby has said his goal is to be the AEW World Champion. Now, though, here the company is in peril, and this could be a way to give Darby his crowning moment by being the man to take the title back for AEW. Maybe a Grand Slam in Australia. It's coming up in February. But if he's hell-bent on climbing Mount Everest next year, which he is, let's say he wins the title, that's going to be a really short run. Somebody brought this up in the Facebook group last night, and it's pretty wild. Danielson's last singles match on Monday Night Raw was a loss to Seth Rollins. His last singles match on SmackDown was a loss to Roman Reigns. And his last singles match, for now anyway, in an AEW ring, was a loss to Jon Moxley. The Shield owns Bryan Danielson's soul. Then, now, and forever.